Hey guys, back again with some Modern on Budget, and today we're going to be talking about a deck that I built a while ago. But this deck actually I decided to recently revamp, retune, because there are new cards in the format. So I decided to take a few of those and rebuild this deck. Anyway, so this is Gruul Stompy in Modern, and we're going to start it off. So the first card of the deck is Bloodbraid Elf, which is a 4-drop haste with Cascade, which I know Cascade you're probably seeing a lot in the format right now if you currently play Modern. Now, Cascade says when you cast this spell, exile cards from the top of your library until you exile a non-land card with lesser mana cost, and then you can cast that for free and putting the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So, what that's going to do is it's going to allow us to hit anything else in our deck except for Embercleave. Now, Embercleave is a very nice card, but it's going to be fairly situational. We're not going to want it in all of our matchups, and in some matchups it might not be able to be played. For example, Teferi. So we don't really want it to be dead in our hand, which is why there are only two. I would have tried to squeeze some more in here if you're not going up against Teferis or anything. Like if you're going against mainly creature decks, then Embercleave might be the deck to go against to play. But we distributed the money elsewhere for this deck. Anyway, so we have Bloodbraid Elf, and so we can hit a lot of different things off of this card. A lot of those cards you're gonna notice are either really big or have haste, or both. So we're gonna start off with something that actually is neither of those, which is Dryad Militant, which is a 2/1. And it's for a 1 mana and says if an instant or sorcery be put in the graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. This is a way that gives us a little bit of extra, like, a little extra traction in the format. Our opponents are trying to, our opponents are trying to play stuff. A lot of them are trying to be able to, uh, use their instants and sorceries that they cast for, things like escape. But also, in some matchups, it just helps us against things like burn. Not burn. Well, sometimes like burn, but they'll just kill this. Storm. So, we have this in here, and it's a 2/1 for 1 mana, and it actually combos out with our two other cards that we really want. Not like a huge combo, but like a minor little interaction. And so we're going to hop over to those other two cards for a moment, starting with the one you're probably most familiar with. Pelt Collector is a 1-drop 1/1. Whenever a creature you control enters battlefield or dies, if that creature's power is greater than Pelt Collector's, put a woe encounter on Pelt Collector. As long as Pelt Collector has 3 or more woe encounters on it, it has Trample. What this is going to do is it's just going to slowly scale in the game, or very quickly actually. Especially if you have 1-drops or 2-drops that have 2 toughness, 2 power, 3 power, 4 power, etc. But this is a very good card, and I really like it. I love that it's only $6 for the playset. Then Experiment 1, which is similar, but says 1/1 for 1, and then it says Evolve. Whenever a creature enters battlefield under your control, if it has greater power or toughness than this creature, put a woe encounter on this creature. Now, that means that it doesn't only have to be power, but since we also have Pelt Collector, we're mainly focusing on things with greater power. Anyway, it says remove 2 woe encounters from it and regenerate it. So it's kind of like Pelt Collector, but has a bit of protection built in. So rather than getting trample, it's going to be able to stay on the board. Next up is Earthshaker Kenra, and you probably haven't seen this card been played since unless you're playing Pioneer. If you're playing, you probably haven't seen it played since it was in Standard. But it's a 2/1 haste. When it enters the battlefield, target creature with power less than or equal to Earthshaker Kenra's power can't block this turn. You'll also notice it has haste, and that's going to be a reoccurring thing in our deck. So we can turn 1 to Pelt Collector or Experiment 1 and turn 2 an Earthshaker Kenra and swing in for 4. If they played a creature, they can't block. But do be careful. If you try to play this later on, if they have an Aether Vial, they can just vial it in and then block. Next up, you'll notice that we have like a lot of 1 toughness in this deck, and I know there are things that say, oh, like Lava Dart that say, oh, deal 1 damage to any target. We're not worried about those. We're not. Stringleroot Geist is a 2/1 haste. Haste again. Undying. When this creature dies, if it has no 1/1 counters on it, return to the battlefield under its owner's control with a 1/1 counter on it. So, it enters the battlefield, and if it dies, then it re-enters. So, if this enters on turn 2 after a turn 1 Pellet Collector and then it dies, it comes back as a 3/2, and then our Pellet Collector gets another counter. Next up is On-Crop Crasher, which is another haste, and says you may exert On-Crop Crasher as it attacks. When you do, target creature can't block this turn. Now, exerting means that, like, for a turn, you can't untap it. But it's very useful, especially if your opponent has, like, only 1 blocker or 1 decent blocker. So you're going to be swinging in a lot with things like this. Steel Leaf Champion is, I believe, the only card above 1 mana. Yeah, it's the only creature above 1 mana that does not have haste in our deck. And it is Steel Leaf Champion is a 5/4, cannot be blocked by creatures with power 2 or less, and that is amazing. It is very often, when we play it, going to be a very big threat. It might not be unblockable, but it will definitely be a big threat. We can cast it with Bloodbraid Elf, so we go Bloodbraid Elf, Steel Leaf Champion, and now we have a 3/2 and a 5/4 on the board. But also, the reason why we have all of these haste creatures is that we want to be able to Bloodbraid Elf into a haste creature and just swing in without our opponent being able to untap in between. Anyway, that's that area. Steel Leaf Champion is the only thing above 1 mana without haste, and that's because we're not really concerned about our opponent removing it. Like, it dodges a lot of the removal in the format. It doesn't dodge. It does not dodge Fatal Push. It does not dodge Teferi bouncing it. But if Teferi's bouncing this, then we don't have anything else on the board anyway. But also, it can die to a Fatal Push. But the Fatal Push has to have Revolt in order to do that. So generally, this is a safe card to play. And normally, Fatal Push would have hit something like our Pellet Collector. Anyway, next up is Domri, Anarch of Bolas. Creatures you control get +1/+0, and also says +1. So that static, by the way, I used to run in the Domri raid, but this is amazing because it pumps up all of your creatures, and it is able to just get in a lot of extra damage. +1, add red or green, so it does add mana. And it makes it so creature spells can't be countered this turn once you activate that ability. -2, target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. It's more removal. It's amazing. So what you could easily do is you could play Bloodbraid Elf and then get a Domri, and -2 Domri to have your Bloodbraid Elf fight their creature, and then you can swing in and get that, and you can get that 3 damage. They won't be able. That's hoping that they don't. Their creature doesn't kill your Bloodbraid Elf, but there are other things, for example, that you could easily minus Domri, but that's just an example. Next up is Lightning Bolt as a full 4 of, and I love this card. I'm going to be trying to put it in as many decks as it fits in, but can also go in. It's $7-8 of the budget, but it's just so good. It's just such a good card, and I really think that, well, especially in a deck like this is where you would want to play it, and it's an amazing card. Embercleave says 6 mana, flash. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature you control. We have a lot of attacking creatures. When Embercleave enters the battlefield, attach a target creature you control. Amazing. And equipped creature gets +1/+1, double strike, and trample. Now, that's a lot of words. It says equip 3. But if we attack in with, let's say we turn 1, I'm not going to go through a turn cycle. If we have 4 creatures out, that's the key amount. We swing in. Embercleave costs 2 mana at instant speed to put down and put 1/1 double strike and trample on any of our creatures. We can wait until after blockers are declared as well, so that we can cheese our opponent. And if we did not pass through this with Bloodbraid Elf, our opponent probably isn't seeing it coming. This is basically seeing play in Standard, Historic, maybe Pioneer, but like not Modern. Anyway, Modern's kind of forgotten, I feel, about some of the creature decks because of all the combo decks that were released with Call Time. You'll notice we don't really have Call Time cards in here, because it just I didn't see anything I was terribly impressed with. But I definitely do like the pathways. The pathways are a very nice way to get into this format. And so I tossed in 4 of them. I tossed in 4 Root Brown Crags. Crags won't enter untapped from Pathway, but we do have 12 other things that can have it enter untapped out of our 20 lands. You'll notice that we have 8 forests and 3 mountains. That's because we have a lot more green than we do red. We do have mountains though, and we have red sources, and we also have a single stomping ground. Now the single stomping ground is in here because we had the money. We had the money to play this, and if you have the money, the expectation is if you're watching these videos, you're looking to buy a deck for $100. I could do videos where I'm like, okay, let's try to build it as cheap as possible, as cheap as absolutely possible. But the expectation is that you are going to spend $100 on this deck, and I'm not just going to give you a bunch of bulk that you won't play elsewhere. You'll play Bloodbraids elsewhere. You'll play Pill Collectors elsewhere. Dried Militant possibly. You'll play Lightning Bolts elsewhere. Embercleave elsewhere. Any of these lands you can play elsewhere. Sideboard is going to be played in basically anything that shares a color with this deck. This deck is not going to be, oh, I build this deck once and never use the cards again. So the expectation is that you do spend the $100 on this deck. So I will try to fill it with $100 of cards that will be good in the deck. Stomping Ground is one of those cards that you will use in basically any deck that runs red or green. Anyway, I hope that you enjoyed the deck. And if you have any questions on how it works, card choices, I know a lot of people are going to say, hey, why only 2 Embercleaves? But 1, it's budget, and 2, it's not in the meta right now, I don't think. But 2 does seem to be a really good number for what I've been playtesting. Let me know what you think of the deck below, and if you liked the video, please let me know by smashing that like button. Anyway, I will see you next time.